Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk and ELT. So today, I want to talk about a couple things. I've got some notes here. There is something that happened with me about a week ago, and it got me to thinking. And then, of course, I did my little brain dump dictation. Anyways, and I tried to clarify my thoughts a little bit. And here's what I've come up with. The title of this episode is Navigating Meaningful Conversations in the ESL Classroom. Why? Because if we're not having meaningful conversations, I don't really know what we're doing. We need to be doing things that actually help students communicate their ideas, their opinions, navigate different situations. So, jumping into the scenario that happened, the background is I was in a class with one of my students. She's lovely. She's like an A2 plus student. We were talking about technology. I wanted to do some revision of describing things, comparatives, superlative, that type of stuff. She oftentimes compares things. It seems to be like her mode of communication is to talk about something in comparison with something else, whether it's work or anything else. So anyways, so we were chatting and I had a vocabulary lesson. It was on technology. We were just talking about the technology. It kind of had like a little series of lessons. Not that you really care, but background, right? Background information. And it took a really unexpected turn because her honest reaction to a question was, honestly, I'm sick of technology. I'm tired of people in the comment section. And I laughed and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of fucking trolls on the internet. So that's, yep, I can relate there. And this comes with, like, it was so timely too, because it happened to be, there was a couple trolls trying to say things to me. And I was just like, honestly, if you write me a paragraph commenting on something that I post, like content that I post or things like that, and you take the time to write a paragraph about and complaining about how you don't like it, or you don't like the way that I create things, or you don't like I'm going to tell you right now, I don't read it. So you've wasted your time. I don't know who wins in this situation, but it's certainly not you, because I'm not going to respond to you. And I also don't even waste my time, because if there's something, for example, if there's something there like, oh, I think you're wrong about this, and there's a discussion, that's great. If you're just criticizing to criticize, I just don't deal with trolls. Anyways, okay, so then I was like, what is she talking about? Now, she happens to live near me. She's in Campinas, I'm in Americana, and so we're very close to each other, like 45 minutes away from each other. And she's like, have you seen the story of the soccer player in your city who's in the hospital? And I was like, kind of. Okay, so let me give you the backstory of the backstory. So there is this really tragic situation that happened recently in Americana. There was a soccer player who got into some sort of traffic accident. He had, I think, from what was being said on the internet, which is never clear and certainly does not have all the background details, there was some sort of head injury or like very traumatic injury. He wasn't conscious. He was there. He was being treated at the municipal hospital. If you live in Brazil, you know the precarious situation of being treated in municipal hospital, because sometimes it either doesn't have staffing or it doesn't have materials to be able to give you the proper treatment. Anyways, that's a side political issue. Anyways, so he was in this like really unstable scenario, which is concerning for many people, obviously, because, like it's really bad to have someone in that scenario. Okay. So then, they were reporting on it, and they were saying that he was receiving some sort of procedure from the doctors, and the doctors gave him something. I'm not sure what it was, either if it was medication or if it was like a manual treatment, something like that. And he reacted. He had like a reaction. He started coughing. And then immediately they stopped the treatment because if he's coughing, then that physical reaction indicates that the treatment that they're giving him was not appropriate. But again, the kid's unconscious. Like, it's really kind of a, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know a lot about medicine, but I do know if you have any head injuries or brain injuries, that type of stuff is like not cut and dry. It's not very simple. So anyways, so she was talking about that. She was like, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it was like a bit of a gossip session. And then she said, my frustration with technology is that anybody of the population can get onto social media and they can comment as if they have something valuable to contribute to the conversation. Her frustration was not about the scenario itself. Like, it's tragic. Like, the kid's clearly not in a good place. We want him to get better. He was in an accident. Like, it's not a good scenario. But what happened was there was a news, like from the city, a super short like news thing that he coughed, and so they immediately stopped the procedure because then they had to do something else. Now, if you know in medicine, I don't know, medicine to me just seems like a big like science experiment sometimes, because like you never know how people are going to react to things. Like, you think you maybe can diagnose something, but until you have all of the evidence, anyways. Okay. So he started coughing, and then people, they did the report on it that he was coughing. So then they changed the treatment, blah, blah, blah. And then people in the comment section went absolutely crazy and started judging the doctors who were providing the treatment. And this is where she got agitated. So this is where Julian, my student, Julian is her name. This is where she was like, who are these people? Because one, they started saying like, oh, the doctors, clearly it's malpractice. The doctors don't know what they're doing. Obviously, they're doing the wrong procedures on him. No. This actually went into a very interesting discussion because her and I had this chat. Well, maybe they should, because there's no information. First of all, these people are clearly not doctors. By the way that they were putting sentences together, they are not even, they maybe don't even know their own language. Because the way that they were writing, I'm not sure. Anyways, the clearly not doctors, don't know what they're talking about in the medical field. And then they were judging the team of professionals that was there. Now, if you don't know, the doctors that work in municipal hospitals are usually the doctors that work in all of the private hospitals too. Or they're like, it's mostly the same pool of doctors. Here in my city, we have some terrible doctors, but we have some decent doctors too. So like, I can't imagine that it's going to be like just everyone at the municipal hospital is like a horrible doctor. That's usually not the case, but okay. Anyways, who am I to judge them doing their procedures? I don't have a medical degree. And instead, so we talked about like, instead of saying like, clearly the doctors have malpractice. I mean, that's obvious that this person has some sort of experience behind it and they're judging the medical team. They don't even know who the doctors are, by the way. One, they don't know. Questions that they probably should have asked. Who are the doctors treating this individual? 2, what are the symptoms of this individual? 3, what's the protocol that should be followed? And if it's indicated for this scenario, because we don't know. 4, what are the laboratory results and all of the medical results of all of the testing that they've been doing? Is this a normal response? Like, does this happen if they start with one procedure and then clearly it's not, and the patient has a physical reaction to it? Is this the common occurrence that then it indicates to you that this is clearly not the proper procedure? And if they stopped the procedure, what then did they do? And is that in accordance with like the medical community's directives? Clearly, we can't have all of that information because they're not going to break laws and disclose all of the specific details about this person's. So the fact that internet trolls just get on there, the fact that people have the audacity to think that they can then read 6 lines of a report and make a judgment on whether or not people are being ethical or are competent is outstanding to me. Second, I mean, the critical thinking nowadays has just like gone out the window. Like people just like they can't, how are you even going to judge something based on the lack of information that you have? Like it just shocking. And the fact that people actually think that their opinions matter is hilarious to me. Like your opinion doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, your opinion doesn't matter. All right, so why this stuck with me? First of all, her response immediately, like visceral reaction to like, I'm sick of technology, because she's just like, she's done with it, which was funny. It was hilarious because it's not the typical, politically correct little packaged response like, oh, I'm trying to stay away from technology. No, she just didn't care, which makes me actually quite happy because I find it so, how should I say this? Refreshing, uh, that my students feel as if they can just have those moments in class with me. It's just fantastic. Like you don't have to filter or censor yourself. You can say whatever you want to say, and I'm just not going to judge you. I might ask you a question afterwards, but I'm never going to judge. You do you, I'm going to do me, and that's fine. So loved that. Um, anyways, so it got me to thinking about, well, I loved her reaction because clearly she feels as if this is a safe space for her to have true, authentic, honest reactions, which is nice because I don't want people being packaged, like you don't have to be like, say what you want to say. You can say it in like a nicer way or not, or you can be like me and have absolutely zero filter. I'm not going to answer that right now. You can have zero filter and then just say whatever you want to say and possibly offend somebody and then have to backtrack and be like, well, actually, you didn't really understand what I was talking about. You should have asked a question, but that's okay. Anyways, okay, so moving forward. So that was a story behind her frustration. So the real issue here was that, and we got into this a little bit, and then I think that this also applies for people who are in their classes and teaching people, because all of this is the power of using language, right? This is all about communication. So people were criticizing without enough information, especially when it comes from things that are like complex issues, things like treating medical conditions, which are like traumatic brain injuries is not the easiest thing to say. Like it's black and white, like what you should do here, A or B. That's not really how it happens. Complex issues need further development of how you say things, asking for information, and being able to critically think about things without having so much bias. Clearly, the people in the comment section had a ton of bias because they weren't able to see past that and ask some questions like, oh, well, is that a normal reaction if the procedure, like, did it do anything detrimental for to the kid or not? Okay. And this is just not coming from people who are, oh, they're just ignorant. They don't know. I think I have some notes for myself here. It's this feeling that people have the right to have an opinion about everything, even when they don't understand. Like, there are certain things that I just don't have an opinion on. And I think that's okay. If you give me more information, then maybe I would form an opinion one way or another. But there's so many things that I don't know. And I promise you this has connection to language. Like there's so many things that I don't know. So if you ask me something about something I really don't know about or have no information about, I'm gonna be like, I don't know. I just don't have an opinion about that. I think everybody nowadays, social media is a lot to blame for this, that they feel as if they can have an opinion on everything. But as teachers, we have to also recognize that people are not going to have opinions on everything. And they might not have opinions that you strong enough opinions that you would be able to develop a speaking task for example. So instead of forcing it, maybe we should try and find things that actually cultivate meaningful conversation as opposed to just throwing things out there, like throwing everything out there and seeing what sticks. I think is a better idea. Like sometimes people just don't have an opinion on something. I don't know. At least I don't have an opinion on everything. I know my husband doesn't have an opinion on everything. A lot of my friends are like, because I feel as if I roll in my little group, my little circle here, that people recognize their own ignorance. Like I certainly recognize my own ignorance. And when I'm ignorant about something, I just don't really have that strong of an opinion. And so then if that topic came up in a language class, let's say I was taking, so I'm thinking about taking Spanish because I'm doing some things in Mexico. I need to brush up on my Spanish. That'll be an adventure. But like if I'm in a Spanish class and I don't really have an opinion about something, there's not a whole lot that I'm going to elaborate on. Like even if the teacher has like these beautiful slides and really interesting topics and that has like everything structured, very nice, scaffolded, I have all the language that I need to form an opinion and give my opinion. I just might not have an opinion on it because I don't have any background information. Nowadays, in the comment section, everybody seems to be an expert on everything. So I'm not really sure how that's gonna go for us. But anyway, so as teachers, we want these like real conversations, right? Like we don't want, first, we want people to feel that they're in a safe space that they can just come right out with it and say, hey, like this is stupid. Like these people are dumb. I don't want to engage with this or that, whatever. But also, I don't think we should stick to like surface level topics because sometimes like those surface level conversations where people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I think it's a positive thing because it's good for, I don't know, society if we start recycling. It's like, okay, ugh, like boring. And they're genuinely just trying to get through the activity as opposed to having like a real conversation. So I think my revelation that came was that emotion drives engagement. And when students actually care about something, when students are actually genuinely engaged, interested, they're more naturally motivated to express themselves. So that moment to me with that student was like language gold. I dropped. I did nothing for the rest of class and I just explored that topic with her because strong opinions lead to stronger language use. This is just me having kind of this moment. Like, she clearly was bothered by this. It can be a positive emotion too. It just happened to be a negative emotion that day. She was very clearly bothered by this. And so I thought to myself, I was like, well, cool. Okay, she hates this. So let's explore. And she was just dishing it out. And it turned into a very loose conversational speaking class that was filled with a ton of lexical items, expressions, and everything else. Like it turned into actually, like I said, language gold. It was great. Can every class be like that? I don't think so. But I think that when we do have something that evokes this type of like strong emotion, we need to double down on it instead of just following the plan. Anyways, and so this is why I think personalization is really important. I'm a big advocate of personalizing classes. I think that if you only talk about things that students are comfortable with, not like these random kind of topics that pop up, like I had no idea that she was going to go in this direction, because my question was actually, the original lesson is about technology. Actually, it was not, had nothing to do with like social media or anything like that. Oh my gosh, I got lots of notifications here. Anyways, I had nothing going on with social media, like nothing. It was all about like how things have changed over time in the technological world, but more like gadgets and electronics and things like that. It's tangentially connected, of course, but then I thought to myself, like, whoa, she really was upset by this. It was like this one story. I don't know what it was. It set her off, and it was great for me because I was like, all right, let's go down this rabbit hole. So, um, sometimes when we're teaching like speaking, we think like, oh, these are great questions. It's really going to like really going to people are going to get into it because there's so many different ways of answering this, and they can really personalize it and tell their opinion. Sometimes the topic is just not interesting and the student just doesn't have an opinion on it. So, um I'm not trying to be controversial at this moment. Sometimes I like to be, it's like intentionally, but I'm not trying to be like intentionally controversial for the sake of it. But I do think that we need to give things to students that they genuinely engage with, that kind of push them to think and communicate in different ways, because if they're emotionally charged, then like yeah, for sure they're going to dig into it a little bit. So, um where to go from here. Again, I'm going off. I go off on tangents sometimes. Like, here's the thing. I don't think you have to like redo everything. Like every single class, you have this amazing, super engaging. Like, I don't think that's realistic. I think that the like some classes you're just kind of there getting through whatever you need to get through because the student needs whatever kind of help they need, and you're doing like proficiency building, you're prepping for something. But I do think that there's these like golden moments, and those golden moments are quite insightful, and they help us build other things. So you could, have a series of lessons off of that or something like that. But these things don't happen every class. So like the expectation I think for teachers is not to every single class has to be this amazing. No, like the majority of time, like I'm going to go with 75 to 80% of the time, you're just kind of in the trenches doing what you need to do, like getting stuff done. It's solid teaching. It's not like it's not solid teaching. Like it's legit solid teaching. But when you have these moments, it's like little insights into what this person genuinely is passionate about, or things that you could maybe modify for the next classes. But I have seen teachers, as another like warning, I have seen teachers that they find one thing that the person is excited about, and that's all they do. That's it. It's like for the for the rest of the course, for the rest of the semester, it's like, oh, okay, you're into cycling? Cool. We're going to do everything about cycling. It's like that gets boring too. I think people are just quite dynamic, interesting people, and the little things that set people off into these emotional tangents, positive or negative, I think are those like little golden moments that we need to try to find, because I'm pretty sure most of our students are not one-dimensional people. Like they are interested in other things. If they're overly also, if they're overly interested in just like one thing, I find those type of people to be very boring. But like if you're like just the person that it's I also find it to be emotionally draining. Me, this is Kelly, that I don't know, you can do whatever you want. But like the people that are only interested in one topic, and that is the whole thing. It's just they're sitting on that hill, they're going to die on that hill. It's the only thing. They're so one-dimensional. Like they have a social issue that's really important to them, or they're super into just like only politics, or only like I don't know, whatever, like only this sport and that's all they do, or like if you're Not, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to be like only focused on your kids, but like if that's the only thing you got going for you, like you're not interested in anything else, like I'm slightly concerned. Like you should have you are you living beyond the social political issue or sport that you like you have people are not one dimensional, you know what I mean? So when people say, oh, like, oh, I personalize the classes, it's like, well, yeah, well, don't personalize it to only one topic either. I had no idea that this particular student, one, read the same newspapers that I read. I mean, it makes sense we're in the same region, but like, I didn't think that she was as up to date as she was on this stuff. Two, I had no idea that she was going to make that connection. I thought we were talking about technology. I was going to go into like, do you remember those old phones that we used to take? like the little bricks of like Nokia's or the bigger ones that had the antenna sticking out of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was going in that direction. She went off on a tangent because something bothered her like over the course of the week. So, so yeah, I think that people need to, teachers in general, teachers need to vary topics. I know that we want to get so personalized. I'm only doing this for this. That's not how people interact with the world. The general population is just consuming vast amounts of content. The amount of content that people consume on a day-to-day basis is insane. So they do have surface level knowledge and some opinions about varied topics. If you're doing like a very specialized course because the person has like, okay, I'm doing like preparation for an interview, something silly like that, not silly, but you know what I mean? Like, okay, well, that's very time constrained, obviously, and has a very specific objective. But most people don't stay in prepping for an interview for like months. If they shouldn't. I mean, if they do, I'm not really sure what that says about, well, both the teacher and the student. But, anyways, we have these time constrained periods, but the rest of the periods of people learning a language is not super specialized. When people think of ESP courses, they think like, oh, I'm only going to do this. Do you know how boring that gets? Like, do that. Do that for a couple of years. If it's time constrained, then like, sure, you need to figure it out and you need to get through it because maybe you have a test or maybe you need to do something at work or some sort of function or something like that. Great, that's fine. But those, again, time constrained. Most people have like these small kind of objectives and then they just kind of continue. They need to keep learning the language. And so, oh, wow. Okay, that was a big tangent. Anyways, coming back. So personalized like ESP courses, personalized courses, like don't get too constricted on the topics that you're going to be putting in there. Two, these unexpected moments when excitement, frustration, strong emotions come out are some of the most powerful moments that you have in your classroom because this is a person genuinely trying to express a very strong feeling that they're having. And because they're trying to express that very strong feeling, this is like golden hour for language learning because this is how they want to say these things. This is how they want to express themselves. So take a moment and just allow them to do that. And yeah, so this is what I mean by like meaningful conversations. If you don't start floating around into different topics, again, with the exception of those time constrained objectives, floating around in different topics, you never know what's going to like spark a memory or like get somebody going. So that's my suggestion is you got to navigate these meaningful conversations in a way that's very, very productive. And unless you're in a situation where you're being observed formally because you're doing a course, if you have some sort of time constraint where you have to stay on track and you can't go off on these little tangents. But I would say more often than not, more often than not, I'm going to stick with that. More often than not, you have the ability to kind of float around a little bit. I mean, it was 30 minutes. So I was starting to work on something and then I got distracted by this little tangent of conversation, and so it was 30 minutes of her class. It was half of one class. But half of one class that was very well used. Because she at the end she goes, "I love talking to you." It's like, I'm so glad. I'm so happy that we can have this conversation. Um and she got a lot of feedback. So she learned a lot of words, she learned a lot of expressions of how to express those feelings, especially stronger feelings. We looked at a couple ways. Well, if you're going to be talking to someone who's a little bit more important than me, then you probably should use this, but when you're talking to me, you feel free, you can use that expression. It's just those types of things I feel like are more meaningful for students than forcing them to, constantly be doing these superficial, surface level conversations. They have to do those to kind of have the opportunity to produce and everything else. But when you hit when you strike gold, we can say, since we're using that analogy today, when you strike gold because you find a topic that they have some sort of emotional reaction to, like, I feel like you should stay with it. Because the next day, for example, this week, I don't think I would have gotten that reaction out of her. I think enough time would have passed from that news article and things like that, it might not even popped into her mind. So I'm not sure if that's helpful for anybody. But there you go. So navigating these conversations, I think, is important. Allowing students to have that moment is important. If you are constrained because of, for whatever reason, if you live in Brazil, you know exactly what's happening outside. Anyways, yeah, you have to have these conversations. They have to look at lots of different things and be able to kind of engage with lots of different topics and things like that. But most of it's going to be kind of surface level, and they give their opinions and they feel polite. But if they feel comfortable enough, you will see real reactions and you'll see real emotions. And I think those are the moments that we can really capitalize on, because they're trying to express themselves in a very natural way. They're so focused on the emotion of how they're feeling that they are really like searching for words and phrases, and then we can help them along the way, because that's the way that they're going to naturally express themselves. We don't all express ourselves the same way. I certainly don't talk like a lot of my colleagues. I'm way less polished, but you know I think we all kind of have to find our own style and the way that we feel comfortable expressing ourselves, and those moments, I think, are the golden moments that you can capitalize on. That's it. I'm done with this episode. See y'all later. Bye.